No one went to the birthday party for the CEO's paralyzed daughter, until a black boy said, "Can I join you?" And that simple moment of kindness would become the greatest lesson in justice a privileged family could ever receive. "Daddy, when are my friends going to arrive?" Emma's sweet voice echoed through the empty hall of the Mitchell mansion, where 24 pink balloons floated sadly above empty chairs. Robert Mitchell, CEO of the most profitable pharmaceutical empire on the East Coast, checked his Rolex watch for the 10th time that afternoon. 2 hours. That was how long it had been since the scheduled start time for Emma's 7th birthday party, and not a single child had shown up. The Princess Castle cake remained untouched, the gourmet cupcakes were untouched, and the professional clown hired for $1,000 was fiddling with his cell phone, clearly impatient. The cruel truth was simple: since the accident that left Emma paraplegic 2 years ago, the families of Westfield's elite had gradually distanced themselves. The excuses were always polite, but the prejudice was obvious. A wheelchair bothered them. The reality of disability made them uncomfortable. "They must be stuck in traffic, Princess," Robert lied, adjusting his Italian tie as he watched his daughter maneuver her custom-made wheelchair. Her every movement was a painful reminder of Margaret, his wife who died in the same accident that injured Emma. Just then, the doorbell rang. Robert practically ran to the front door, preparing his best executive smile to finally welcome a guest. But when he opened the ornate door, his smile faltered. A black boy of about 8 stood on the marble steps, wearing a Superman t-shirt with a few holes in it and jeans that had clearly been patched. His worn sneakers contrasted starkly with the luxurious entrance of the mansion. "Hi, sir," the boy said politely, his eyes shining with genuine joy. "I heard there's a birthday party here. My name is Jamal, and I live in the public housing down the street." He pointed to the housing project that was barely visible through the wrought iron gates. Robert was momentarily speechless. Of all the rich kids in Westfield who had rejected Emma's invitation, it was a poor kid from the community who had come knocking on her door asking to join the party. "I don't have an invitation," Jamal continued honestly, "but I promise I'll be on my best behavior. I just saw the balloons through the window and thought maybe the birthday girl was feeling lonely." Before Robert could respond, Emma appeared behind him, pushing his chair curiously. "Daddy, who is it?" Jamal smiled broadly, revealing a missing front tooth. "Hi. You must be the birthday girl. Happy birthday. Sorry I don't have a present, but I can sing happy birthday really loud if you want." Emma laughed for the first time in months. "Do you really want to stay at my party?" "Of course I do. Birthday parties are the best thing ever." Robert watched the interaction with growing amazement. In 5 minutes, an unknown boy had achieved what expensive therapists and organized events had failed to do: make Emma smile genuinely. But there was something in Jamal's eyes, a subtle maturity that seemed strange for someone so young. As if he understood perfectly the kind of loneliness Emma was feeling. As if he had already faced his own kind of rejection and exclusion. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of childhood kindness would expose the deepest wounds of an entire community, and how true revenge sometimes comes wrapped in the most unexpected package possible. "Come in, Jamal," Robert said, opening the mansion door wide. Emma really needed a true friend. The afternoon that followed was a revelation that left Robert completely baffled. Jamal didn't just attend the party, he completely transformed it. He played with Emma as if her wheelchair was the least important thing in the world, invented games where she was the heroine, and made a point of complimenting every detail of the decorations as if they were the most impressive things he had ever seen. "Man, that cake is huge," Jamal exclaimed, his eyes wide. "In my family, we celebrate with boxed cake, but this one looks like something out of a movie." Emma laughed so hard she almost choked on her soda. "Jamal, you're the funniest friend I've ever had." While the children played in the mansion's garden, Robert watched from the window, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and guilt. How was it possible that an 8-year-old boy from the suburbs had more compassion and naturalness than the entire educated elite of Westfield? That's when the phone rang. "Robert? This is Patricia Vanderbilt," said the cold voice on the other end of the line. Patricia was the mother of one of Emma's old friends and president of the board of the most exclusive private school in town. "I need to talk to you about a delicate matter." "What's going on, Patricia?" "Well, some mothers have called me with concerns. They say there's a child, different, playing on your property. A child who clearly doesn't belong in our social circle." Robert felt the blood rush to his head. Are you talking about Jamal? The only boy who cared enough to show up at my daughter's party. Robert, you need to understand our position. We have traditional families with certain standards. We don't want our children mixing with unsuitable elements, especially considering Emma's fragile state. The coldness of her words hit Robert like a punch. Inappropriate elements? Patricia, you're talking about an 8-year-old child. A child from that housing project, Robert. We all know what kind of people live there. Drugs, violence, lack of family structure. Do you really want to expose Emma to that influence? Through the window, Robert could see Jamal carefully pushing Emma's wheelchair through the garden, both of them laughing as they pretended to be race car drivers. The scene was so pure and joyful that it contrasted brutally with the venom coming out of the phone. You know what, Patricia? Jamal has shown more class and manners in 2 hours than you have in years of friendship. Robert, don't be naive. These people always have ulterior motives. They're probably already planning how to exploit his generosity. After he hung up the phone, Robert stood still, watching the children. For the first time in 2 years, Emma was genuinely happy. And he was being attacked for it. Later, as Jamal was getting ready to leave, something happened that Robert would never forget. Emma took her new friend's hand and said, Jamal, are you coming back tomorrow? If my dad lets me, I'll be back every day. Jamal replied, smiling broadly. What if people say bad things about you? Jamal was serious for a moment, a surprising maturity shining in his young eyes. Emma, my grandmother always teaches me one important thing. People who judge by appearances can never see people's hearts. And people with good hearts don't care what bad people think. Robert felt a lump in his throat. This 8-year-old boy had more wisdom about human dignity than any of the multimillionaire CEOs he knew. Jamal, Robert said, kneeling down to the boy's height. You will always be welcome in this house. Always. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. And don't worry about what people will say. My family has been through much worse, and we always come out stronger. There was something in the way Jamal said it that made Robert realize there was much more to that family than meets the eye. A quiet strength, a dignity that neither poverty nor prejudice could break. As he watched the boy walk back to the public housing, Robert had no idea that this seemingly innocent encounter was about to expose the deepest rot in Westfield, and that the real lesson in justice would come from where he least expected it. What those privileged people didn't know was that every word of contempt was being carefully observed by eyes that understood perfectly the true character of each one of them, and that some lessons in humility come wrapped in the most unexpected packages possible. In the days following Emma's party, the silent war against the Mitchell family intensified in a cruel and calculated manner. Patricia Vanderbilt had mobilized her network of influence like a general organizing an army, and the attacks came from all sides simultaneously. The first strike was at Emma's private school. Mr. Mitchell, Headmistress Helen Carstairs, said during a frosty phone call on Monday morning, we've received some concerns from parents about inappropriate associations that may be affecting the school environment. Perhaps it would be best to reconsider some of Emma's friendships. Are you referring to Jamal? Robert asked, feeling anger rise in his chest. Well, our institution has a reputation to uphold. Traditional families expect certain standards of social behavior. Robert slammed down the phone, but the attacks were just beginning. On Tuesday, his pharmaceutical company inexplicably lost 3 major contracts. Decades-long clients cited strategic changes and new market directions, but Robert knew the Westfield business elite too well to not recognize a coordinated campaign. On Wednesday, the golf club where he had been a member for 15 years reviewed its membership policy and suggested that he might want to re-evaluate his social priorities before renewing his membership. But it was on Thursday that the cruelest blow came. Emma came home from school with red eyes from crying, her wheelchair moving slower than usual. Daddy, she whispered, the girls in my class said I can't sit with them at lunch anymore because I'm friends with a. What, sweetheart? They used a bad word that I won't repeat. And they said that if I keep being friends with Jamal, none of them will talk to me anymore. Robert felt something break inside his chest. They were attacking his 8-year-old daughter because of a pure and genuine friendship. It was time to react. On Friday, Robert did something that surprised even himself. Instead of heading to the office, he drove to the housing complex where Jamal lived. He needed to get to know the family that had stirred up so much hatred in people he thought he knew. The The Rodriguez apartment was small but immaculately clean and organized. Jamal's grandmother, Dona Carmen, greeted him with a dignity that contrasted sharply with the pettiness he had encountered all week. "Mr. Mitchell," she said in careful but clear English, "Jamal told me about the problems our friendship has caused your family. Perhaps it would be best if he didn't visit Emma anymore." "Absolutely not," Robert replied firmly. "I want to understand something, Dona Carmen. How do you deal with people who judge you by your appearance?" The 62-year-old woman smiled with a wisdom that only comes from decades of facing adversity. "Mr. Mitchell, my family came here from Mexico 30 years ago with nothing but hope and determination. Jamal was born here, but from an early age he learned that not everyone will see him for his character. We taught him that when people show us who they really are, we believe in them. And when they try to make us feel small, we remember that our dignity does not depend on the approval of those who have no heart." Just then, Miguel Rodriguez, Jamal's father, arrived home from work. His hands were dirty with grease and paint, and his construction uniform revealed long hours of hard physical labor. But when he greeted Robert, his posture showed unshakable pride. "Mr. Mitchell, I want you to know that our family is not looking for charity or special favors. We work hard for what we have, and we have taught Jamal to do the same." "Miguel," Robert said, extending his hand, "I want to propose something. My pharmaceutical company is expanding our social responsibility program. We need someone to oversee community projects, someone who truly understands the needs of the people." Miguel hesitated. "Mr. Mitchell, I didn't go to college. I'm just a construction worker." "You have something more valuable than a diploma. You have integrity, you know your community, and you've raised an extraordinary son. The salary would be 4 times what you make in construction." Dona Carmen interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are you doing this for us?" "Because you remind me of who I used to be before I became part of a world that measures value by the money in the bank." But there was something else Robert hadn't revealed. Throughout that week of coordinated attacks, he had been secretly documenting every move, every phone call, every suspicious cancellation. As the CEO of a multimillion-dollar pharmaceutical company, Robert had resources and connections Patricia Vanderbilt couldn't even imagine. Dr. James Thompson, her personal lawyer and friend of decades, had been discreetly hired to investigate the real motives behind the campaign against her family. What they discovered was far worse than simple social prejudice. "Robert," Thompson had called the previous afternoon, "you need to see what we've found. Patricia Vanderbilt and at least 6 other families from Westfield's elite are involved in something much bigger than attacking your family." "What are you talking about, James?" "Systematic housing discrimination, manipulation of municipal contracts, and most importantly, a scheme to buy the land on which Jamal's family lives, for a fraction of its market value, forcing the residents out through social and economic pressure." Robert felt the blood drain from his face. They want to kick those families out of their homes? Worse. They want to tear down the entire complex and build a luxury condominium. The project has already been approved by the city council, with signatures from everyone involved in the boycott against you. At that moment, sitting in the humble but dignified Rodriguez family living room, Robert understood that this had never been about Jamal or Emma. It was about power, greed, and the sadistic desire to eliminate anything that reminded the Westfield elite that there were people with genuine values in a world built on appearances. "Miguel," Robert said calmly, "will you take the job at my company?" "Yes, sir. It would be an honor." "Great. Because your first project will be very special. We're going to prove that some people make the fatal mistake of underestimating both the power of unity and the consequences of messing with the wrong family." What Patricia Vanderbilt and her allies didn't know was that every move of discrimination was being carefully documented by someone with enough resources to turn predators into prey, and that the real battle was just beginning. The Westfield City Council meeting on Monday night should have been a mere formality. Patricia Vanderbilt and her allies had carefully orchestrated every detail for months, ensuring that the vote to demolish the housing complex and approve the luxury condominium would be virtually unanimous. "Item 15 on the agenda," announced Mayor Henderson, clearly bored. "Final approval for the Westfield Gardens project, replacing the current housing complex with high-end residences." Patricia adjusted her Chanel blazer and smiled confidently from the front row, surrounded by her allies from the local elite. Next to her, developer Charles Morrison reviewed the contracts that would yield millions in profits for everyone involved. It was the ultimate victory, not just against Robert Mitchell, but against any notion that unsuitable people belonged in her exclusive neighborhood. That's when the auditorium doors opened. Robert Mitchell entered accompanied by Miguel Rodriguez, Dr. James Thompson, and even more surprisingly, 3 investigative journalists and a representative from the Federal Housing Department. Patricia felt a chill in her stomach, but she kept her composure. These were just the desperate attempts of a defeated man. "Mr. Mitchell," Mayor Henderson said nervously, "this meeting is almost over." "Actually," Robert interrupted calmly, "I would like to present some relevant information about the Westfield Gardens project that the council should perhaps know before voting." Dr. Thompson approached the podium carrying a bulky folder. "Council members, I represent not only Mr. Mitchell, but also 68 families residing in a housing complex who are being illegally coerced into abandoning their homes." Patricia felt her heart race. "That's ridiculous. All families were properly notified in accordance with the law." "Ms. Vanderbilt," Thompson continued with an icy smile, "you might want to reconsider that statement." He activated a projector, and the first image appeared on the screen. It was an audio recording. Patricia's voice echoed through the auditorium. "We need to make these people's lives so uncomfortable that they have no choice but to accept our ridiculous offer. Cut off services, increase fines, do whatever it takes." Patricia's blood turned to ice. How had they gotten that recording? "That's illegal. Recording without consent," she shouted, losing all composure. "Actually," said the federal agent present, "you have been under investigation for 3 months for violations of the Federal Fair Housing Act. This recording was obtained legally through an investigation authorized by a court order." The second image appeared, emails between Patricia, Morrison, and city council members discussing how to speed up the removal of undesirables and ensure that the new project maintains the ethical standards of the community. Charles Morrison tried to get up discreetly to leave, but found 2 federal agents blocking the door. "Mr. Morrison," Thompson continued relentlessly, "would you like to explain to the council why your company offered only 30% of market value for the properties in the housing complex?" The third revelation was devastating. Falsified contracts, manipulated appraisals, and a coordinated scheme to defraud both the families and the city of millions of dollars. Robert finally stood up, his voice calm but laden with moral authority. "For weeks, we have watched this same elite who consider themselves morally superior attack my family because my daughter befriended a poor black child. You used your influence to try to destroy my business, isolate my daughter at school, and socially exclude us." He pointed to Patricia, who was now visibly shaking. "But your arrogance blinded you to one crucial detail. While you wasted time attacking a family for embracing diversity, I was meticulously documenting every illegal move you made." The fourth revelation was the most humiliating. Robert had secretly recorded phone conversations in which Patricia and others openly discussed their racial prejudices and plans to clean up Westfield of undesirable elements. "Not only did you discriminate against the Rodriguez family and other families in the housing complex," Robert continued, "you committed documented federal crimes that will result in imprisonment and total bankruptcy for everyone involved." Patricia tried one last desperate ploy. "Robert, you're destroying an entire community because of hurt feelings." Miguel Rodriguez rose slowly, his unshakable dignity contrasting with her desperation. "Ma'am, my family came to this country 30 years ago with nothing but hope and a willingness to work. We never asked for charity or special favors. We only wanted the basic right to live in peace and raise our children with dignity. You turned this into a war because you can't accept that human value isn't measured by money or skin color," he continued, his voice growing in strength. "Now you're going to learn that underestimating hardworking, decent people has consequences you never imagined." Mayor Henderson, realizing he was deeply embroiled in the scandal, tried to end the meeting abruptly. But federal agents were already handing out search warrants. Patricia Vanderbilt, the woman who had orchestrated a vicious campaign against an innocent family, was led out of the auditorium in handcuffs as camera flashes recorded every second of her public humiliation. As the handcuffs closed around the wrists of those who once thought they were above the law, one question echoed in the air: can true justice really heal such deep wounds, or must some lessons about humanity be learned in the most painful way possible? 6 months after the scandal that rocked Westfield, the transformation was visible on every corner of the city. Robert Mitchell was in his redesigned office, now decorated with drawings by children who had benefited from his pharmaceutical company's social programs, when Emma rolled in, pushing her wheelchair with renewed energy. "Dad, look!" she exclaimed, showing him a photo on her tablet. Jamal won first place at the school science fair. His project on preventive medicine in the community was chosen to represent the city at the state fair. Robert smiled, remembering how, just a few months ago, that same boy had been treated like a threat by the local elite. Now Jamal attended the same private school as Emma, with a full scholarship sponsored by Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, and had become one of the school's academic stars. Emma's life had been completely transformed. Far from the false friends who had abandoned her because of prejudice, she had found a genuine circle of children who valued her for her brilliant personality and sharp sense of humor. Her physical disability had become just a minor detail amid true friendships built on mutual respect and sincere affection. "You know what else, Dad?" Emma continued excitedly. "The teacher said that our presentation on diversity and inclusion was so good that other schools want to invite us to teach about true friendship." The phone rang, and Robert answered with a smile still on his face. It was Miguel Rodriguez, now Director of Social Responsibility at Mitchell Pharmaceuticals, calling from one of the community clinics they had implemented last semester. "Robert, you need to see the numbers from the Latino Neighborhood Clinic," Miguel said, his voice heavy with pride and emotion. "We served over 1,200 families this month, and the free medication program has helped over 3,000 children. Donna Carmen is here with me, and she wants to thank you personally." Donna Carmen's frail but determined voice echoed through the phone. "Mr. Mitchell, my family came to this country with only hope and faith. We never imagined we would find someone who would turn our hope into real opportunity. My grandson is studying preventive medicine because you showed us that dreams can come true when they meet generous hearts." Robert felt his eyes well up. The pharmaceutical company he had inherited and expanded for decades had finally found its true purpose. Profits had not only been maintained, but had increased exponentially when they shifted their focus from exorbitant margins for a select few to volume and accessibility. Meanwhile, across town, Patricia Vanderbilt faced a drastically different reality. Sitting in a modest apartment, a brutal fall from her former $2 million mansion, she pored over piles of legal documents that sealed her financial and social ruin. Federal investigations had uncovered not only the real estate scheme, but a web of corruption that stretched back decades. Patricia had lost literally everything: her home, her investments, her social status, and most of all, her family's respect. Her adult children had completely cut her off, ashamed by the public exposure of her prejudices and crimes. Charles Morrison, the developer who had orchestrated the real estate scheme, was serving an 8-year federal prison sentence. His company had gone bankrupt, and the properties he had planned to steal from the families in the housing complex were turned into a model community center, providing education, healthcare, and job opportunities for the entire region. Mayor Henderson had resigned in disgrace and been replaced by Maria Gonzalez, the first Latina mayor in Westfield's history, elected on a platform of inclusion and social justice. Her first act had been to appoint Miguel Rodriguez as special advisor for community development. The private school where Emma studied had undergone a complete administrative revolution. Former principal Helen Carstairs was fired for discrimination and replaced by Dr. James Patterson, a black educator with a PhD in inclusive education. The scholarship program was expanded, and the institution became a national model for diverse and inclusive education. But perhaps the most significant transformation took place in the heart of the Westfield community. Families that had previously isolated themselves in their bubbles of privilege began to actively participate in community programs. Children from different socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds played together in parks, parents from diverse cultures collaborated on school projects, and the town developed a genuinely multicultural identity. Robert implemented a revolutionary program at his company. For every high-margin drug sold to patients with premium health insurance, an identical drug would be provided free of charge to low-income families. The model became so successful that other pharmaceutical companies began to emulate it, creating a wave of change throughout the industry. The community clinic founded on the former site Patricia wanted to steal became a regional medical referral center. Donna Carmen, despite her advanced age, volunteered 3 times a week, teaching other immigrant families about preventive health care and basic citizenship rights. Jamal and Emma had become local symbols of genuine friendship transcending social barriers. They were invited to speak at conferences on inclusion, appeared on local television shows, and their stories inspired educational changes in dozens of schools across the region. "Daddy," Emma said one afternoon as she and Jamal were finishing a school project on social justice, "do you remember when I was sad because no one came to my party?" "Of course I do, sweetheart. Now I understand that it was the best thing that could have happened." If those fake kids had come, I would never have met Jamal and his wonderful family. Sometimes bad things happen to make room for much better things. Jamal nodded wisely, his maturity impressive for someone so young. My grandmother always says that when people show you who they really are, believe them the first time. Those people showed that they were prejudiced and mean. You showed that you are generous and fair. Now everyone can see the difference. Robert watched the two friends and realized that they had understood something that many adults take decades to learn. A person's value is not measured by his bank account, the color of his skin or his address, but by the content of his character and the way he treats others. Mitchell Pharmaceuticals had become the most respected company in its industry, not only because of its record profits, but because it had proven that ethical business and social responsibility not only coexist, but reinforce each other. Robert received weekly invitations to speak at universities and business conferences about how to transform organizations through genuine values. Patricia Vanderbilt, on the other hand, had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with the privileged elite. Occasionally, Robert would see her at the grocery store in the neighborhood where she now lived, carefully avoiding any eye contact. Her fall had been so complete in public that it became a case study in business schools about the consequences of leadership based on prejudice and corruption. One afternoon, exactly 1 year after the scandal, Robert was reading to Emma and Jamal in the mansion's garden when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Mitchell? This is Patricia Vanderbilt." Robert hesitated, but decided to answer. "What can I do for you, Patricia?" I would like to apologize for the terrible things I did, said, and thought about your family and the Rodriguez family. I lost everything, and deservedly so, but I finally understand how wrong I was. Patricia, I appreciate your words, but my apologies should go to the families you tried to harm, not to me. I've already done that. I wrote letters to Miguel, Carmen, and even little Jamal. I know I can never undo the harm I've caused, but I wanted you to know that your family taught me a lesson I should have learned decades ago. What lesson? That true wealth has absolutely nothing to do with money. After hanging up, Robert reflected on how justice had taken such a complete and satisfying form. Patricia had not only lost her status and fortune, she had been forced to confront the terrible person she had become and, perhaps for the first time in her life, showed genuine remorse. The story of Robert Mitchell and Jamal Rodriguez proved that when you plant seeds of kindness and justice, even in seemingly barren soil, the garden that grows can transform entire communities. Sometimes the best revenge against prejudice is not to destroy those who hurt you, but to build a world where that prejudice can no longer flourish. If this story touched your heart and strengthened your faith in human kindness, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true justice always finds its way to those who have the courage to plant it.